Welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast. I am your host, Andrea Miller, and I'm so excited to bring this show to you. Show Me the Way is a podcast dedicated to exploring the journeys of those who have faced adversity and found themselves on unexpected paths. We will have meaningful, thoughtful conversations about challenges we have faced and how we discovered and forged new direction. Prepare to be inspired and to uncover your own strength as you listen to relatable and motivating stories. Life has a way of twisting and turning, and we often need a fresh perspective to understand how to navigate. Let's show each other the way. This week on Show Me the Way, I sit down with Shari Davidek. I met Shari through my local Chamber of Commerce networking group, where she works behind the scenes and is a huge support to everyone involved. My friend and former guest, Christine Spradlin, knew Shari had a meaningful story to share, and she was right. Shari is a devoted wife and mom of five, four boys and one girl, who each have shaped her into the strong, grounded woman she is today. But nothing could have prepared her or her husband for what happened when their oldest son was in high school. He suffered two strokes in a very short period of time, leaving doctors unsure if he would survive, let alone walk, talk, or remain the same person they knew and loved. Their son endured a coma, uncertainty, and immense suffering. But then, miraculously, he woke. Within just weeks, he began to communicate. What followed was a long road of therapy and determination, but he pushed through with resilience that inspired everyone around him. Not only did he recover, but he thrived. He finished high school, attended community college, found a job, lived independently with new roommates, and eventually went away to school where he made friends and met the woman who would become his wife. Today, he is working, married, and living with the kind of gratitude and perspective that only comes from surviving the unimaginable. Shari shares this emotional journey with honesty, vulnerability, and incredible insight. She opens up about how the experience shaped her marriage, her parenting, and her children's view of the world. Her story is powerful, perspective shifting, and filled with wisdom we can all use, whether or not we faced a tragedy like hers. This is an episode you'll carry with you long after it ends. Welcome back to the Show Me the Way podcast. Today, I want to welcome a new friend to the show, Shari Davidek. Many of you recall that my dear friend and one of our guests, Christine Spradlin, has referred and introduced me to a few guests on the show. She has been a true supporter, and I've appreciated all of her ideas and thoughts. Christine knows Shari quite well through networking and business events and suggested that I also interview her and learn of her story. Christine and I are part of a business networking group within a chamber organization near our houses in Michigan, and Shari works for this organization. She's a huge support to our group, and she is also from Michigan. I know that she's a mom. She's a hardworking woman. Every time I see her, she's welcoming, open, and definitely a great connection to have. As I always say, everybody has a story, and I know that Shari will show us the way with hers. Welcome to the show, Shari. I can't wait to learn more about you with my listeners.
Oh, thanks, Andrea.
Of course. So I like to start the show just saying a little bit about how I met the guest or how I've been introduced to the guest, but I also like to give them an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit more that I didn't say. So Shari, tell us more about you.
So I've been married 33 years. We've lived in Livonia 32 years. Rob and I have five children. The oldest is 29, the next one is 28, the next one is 23, the next one is 20, and the last one is 18. So I have four sons and one daughter. The last two are both in college at the same college, which is nice to be able to see them. The oldest lives in Grand Rapids. The middle lives in Toronto. And the second one lives in Wyandotte, just bought his first house. I have a background in public relations. I worked for a company for a long time called Community Living Services, and I did public relations there. It's a nonprofit that supports people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. I loved that job, just loved it. And then I've had a couple of other stepping stones after that. And then I landed here at the Chamber of Commerce, which I love. We have such a great team. I love what I do. I mean, I get to talk to people all the time and I get to help them. And that just brings me a lot of joy.
Oh, that's perfect. And you can tell that you're very, very good at what you do, very supportive. And like I said, a great connection to have.
Thank you.
So thanks for doing that. And yes, you are quite a mom, five children. Wow, I did not realize that. That is really great. And just listening to you talk, of course you have stories upon stories. We've all dealt with different things in our life where, just like you said, changes in career and just being a mom, being a wife. So, yeah, As you know, the Show Me the Way podcast is an opportunity for us to talk about times in our life where we dealt with adversity or we had to pivot or something looked very different than what we had mapped out in our heads. And as our listeners know, it started because I have a younger son who has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And when he was 5 years old, he's now 16, he was diagnosed. And my husband and my lives like just flipped upside down. And we thought the original plan that we had in mind was going to look different. And obviously it was difficult, but we did determine that we were going to move forward in the most positive way possible. And we were going to create the best quality of life we could for him. And he is thriving at 16. So we hope that we've done a lot of good things with him. But yeah, it just looked very different than the plan I had in my head when I was 25, 28 years old.
Right.
And many of us can say that with or without a diagnosis for our children. I mean, sometimes it's, I need to move to another state. Sometimes I was going to be a teacher and then I decided to go into something else. And there's just so many times along the way that all of a sudden this path, this 5-year plan that we had written up for ourselves looked completely different. So
Yeah.
it's been very enjoyable. We're on season 2 to hear so many different stories. Like I said, sometimes it is a diagnosis for our child, sometimes it's for ourselves, sometimes it's grief, sometimes it's changing jobs or changing locations. But everybody's been able to come on here, tell a story, and then share perspective and things that they've learned. So I know that Shari definitely has a lot of things that she's been through, but she shared a pretty specific example. Sometimes people say, after this day, everything changed. Sometimes they talk about just throughout life, all the things that they've been through. So there's really no script, there's no forced answers that I put Shari in place to answer. So it's just whatever is on her heart. But I definitely want to give her the opportunity to speak about what she mentioned when we talked about getting her on the show. And I will just ask questions as they come up, but I will let Shari have the mic.
Okay. So in 2013, my oldest son he was at work, and at that time he was working at McDonald's. He came home from work and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go out with my friends. We're going to go out and get something to eat." Okay. So my husband and I went to bed, and a half hour later, we got a call from his friend that he was with, and he said an ambulance just had to come pick up Jack. We were at Steak and Shake, and he collapsed outside, and he had a horrible headache. And that freaked me out because I was like, okay, I know what that means. So we drove to Botsford. It was Botsford at the time. It's now Corwell. We drove over there, and as soon as we came in, the ER doctor was running down the hallway, grabbing us, saying, "I need to talk to you." And so pulled us in a room, and she said, "Your son has a significant brain bleed on the left side of his brain." She said, "We can't handle that kind of trauma, so he needs to be airlifted to U of M." Said, "Okay." So we got in the car and drove behind him. We watched the helicopter flying, and we got there, and they were waiting for us at Mott because he was still a pediatric patient at the time. They were waiting for us in this empty, the building was, the part that we were at was empty, and they rushed us upstairs, and the flight crew was crying, which is not a good sign. And so they're like, this is significant. Make sure you tell them everything you need to tell them just in case. And they gave me all of his stuff. He almost died inside the helicopter because his heart rate went way down, like to 10 or something like that. Um, Took him into surgery. He got out of surgery. This was about midnight. Got out of surgery around 4 a.m. And they came and told us that he had an arterial venous malformation, which is similar to an aneurysm. Um, but it's a birth defect. It's a tangle of blood vessels, and it ruptured. So that was why he had the brain bleed, which is essentially a hemorrhagic stroke. And so they said we repaired it. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we're guarded but hopeful. So he seemed okay. And then around 11 o'clock that morning, it ruptured again and it was worse. So they rushed him back to surgery, um, took out a piece of his skull, They were able to evacuate the blood and kind of cauterize it to stop the bleeding. But when they brought him back, they said he has about a 1% chance of survival. So we sat there. I'm telling you, nurses are amazing. When you're in the pediatric ICU, you have one nurse and they're with you until the next nurse comes on after 12 hours. And they were wonderful with him. He's 6'4", and he was 6'4" at that time. So his feet were hanging off the bed, and they just took really good care of him. And they kept telling us, they said, it's on the left side of his brain, the left temporal lobe. That's where your speech center is. So it's likely he will not be able to understand language, incoming language, or be able to speak again. They weren't sure if he'd be able to walk again because it was a significant bleed. And having two strokes within 12 hours is bad, obviously. So, they were very guarded for that first whole day, and then they were able to start cutting back on some of the medications and everything. But they had to keep they and his skull was out. That piece of his skull they left out. So they were very guarded, and they kept watching his ICP, which is your intracranial pressure. And there were times where it would go up above 20, and that's if you go above 15, it's dangerous. So they were very worried about that. But then it calmed down. So that first week he was in a induced coma a week. So he wasn't moving. They had to, they had to brush his teeth for him, all that stuff. He just was there. So I barely ate for an entire week. And I remember walking down the hall. They came in to do a procedure. I think they had to do a pick line or something. So we couldn't be in there. And we were walking down the hall to go to the cafeteria. And I was so out of it because I hadn't eaten. Everything was shutting down. And I ran into a one of his friends. He played football and basketball. And one of the boys that he played football with, his mom was a PICU nurse. Ran into her in the hall. And she goes, "Oh, I've been looking for you guys." And I just looked at her and I couldn't comprehend who she was. And I knew her. I and that's when I knew it was like, all right, I need to eat. I need to make sure at least I have a smoothie every day or something. So, after a week, they started weaning him off of the paralytics. And then for another week, he just wasn't really responding. And the doctor kept saying every day that he doesn't respond, don't expect a lot. So on day 8 of this whole thing, 8 or 9, at that time, you're 17, your friends are the most important thing in the world. So I called his friends that were with him that night, and we hadn't had anybody other than my parents, Rob's parents, and our siblings come into the room because it was just too hard. So we invited his friends to come up and sit there, and we're talking in the corner quietly. And all of a sudden, Jordan, his friend, goes, "Mrs. Davidek, look." And I looked over, and Jack's eyes were wide open. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I think hearing his friends' voices, that really helped and it kind of woke him up. So the next couple days, it was just kind of a little bit better, a little bit better. His eyes were open, no communication. Um, and then on day 12, occupational therapy came in, physical therapy, and they sat him up in bed and he said, "Get the F out of here." And we were we were dying. Of course, you're like, "Oh my gosh, he's swearing in front of all these people." But he said a full sentence, which was amazing. A full recognizable sentence. So we're like, "Okay, he can talk." Well, come to find out, since he's left-handed, 10% of left-handed people have their speech center on the right side of their brain. So that was a miracle right there.
Oh, wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So that was crazy. So, but after that, that gave us a lot of hope, obviously. And then the physical therapist came in and they're like, okay, we're going to start setting up therapies for him. And I was so happy because I, I felt like we weren't given a lot of hope. And having them come in and say, "Yeah, he needs to start rehabbing," it was like, "Okay, thank God." So we did that, and he was moved to a different floor, which was good. And there was one day where he was in therapy and rehab, and all of a sudden, he was just kind of sitting there, like not really communicating or paying attention. And they handed him a basketball, and they said, "Okay, can you shoot this basketball?" And he took it and he did a form. Well, I didn't know what it was, but a form shot where he took it in his hand and did like a specific move. And my husband was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he just did that." Like he understood that. Um, so that same day, um, here I go. Um, oh, so that was the day he woke up basically. And he hugged me and he smiled and we couldn't believe it. It was just like, "Oh my gosh, he's back." Later on, he did tell me, he said, "I remember going in and out and sometimes thinking I was dreaming. I didn't know what was reality and what was what, but that eventually came back." So he started doing better and he started walking and he was talking and he was goofing around with his brother Sam, who is my second one. They're very, very close, always were from the beginning. So then this was 3 weeks later. My husband finally went back to work. He was going to do part-time for a little bit, just half days. It was on his birthday, and Jack was having the surgery that day to put his skull back in. And my husband calls me. He's like, "Your dad had a stroke." And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." And they were watching my three youngest kids at the time. So my poor mom's sitting there. She was watching all these kids, and they were what? I think they were 6, 8, and 10 or 11 at the time. So they take my dad to the hospital, and then eventually he was transferred to U of M, which was good because for the next few weeks I ran back and forth between both hospitals. They were both connected. So he didn't he's still here. He's 89, just turned 89. He didn't recover as well. He's not able to do much, but that kind of it helped in a way because Jack would go over there. We would walk over, and he would kind of try to get my dad to do things, and he did for the longest time. But I think my dad just was like, "I don't," he kind of gave up. Um, and this is funny, but at the time, we have a really close friend named Josh that used to live next door, and he got divorced and had met this girl who is a doctor at U of M. And I knew she had long red hair, and her name was Stacy. And Jack and I had walked over. At this time, he was doing really well in therapy. We walked over to the hospital. I walked out of the elevator, and Stacy and I ran into each other and we looked at each other and we knew exactly who each other was and we hugged each other and it was great and we've been best friends ever since. So that was something good that came out of that. So Jack made it through rehab. We were there for 2 months and he came home, and that was when he was starting his senior year of high school. So it was a little bit rough at first. And um, we had to drive to Ann Arbor 4 days a week for therapy. Um, so at that time, I had taken a leave of absence, obviously, from my job. And the lady who did the education part at the rehab, thankfully, she was on his side because he said, "I want to take all my classes." And a lot of his physical therapists were like, "No, like you're just going to set him up for failure." And he was like, "I don't care if I fail, I got to try." So he went to high school, and thankfully, we had a great principal and a great staff that really helped us. So there were a few classes he couldn't take, but they were able to replace them with other classes. He graduated, had no problem. obviously wasn't allowed to play football. But then basketball came around and we took him in for a checkup and they're like, you cannot be out there playing basketball. And he was just so upset. And he'd had such a good attitude. I felt horrible for him. But so he got over that. He was like the team mascot kind of. So he still had a good year, had a great coach. His coach was amazing. His coach was the first person I think I called because I was like, "Hey, do you know, did anything happen in basketball practice that you know of? Did he hit his head?" This was before we knew what was wrong. And so Brandon he was out of town at the time and he sent his dad up to the hospital with food and he brought the entire basketball team up to the hospital when Jack was able to get around. He was wonderful. He was great. He did a fundraiser for us for medical bills and stuff like that. Um, and just, we all know insurance stinks right now. At that time, we had great insurance. Thank the Lord. Because his medical bills ended up being about $1.5 million. Um, and I think we were only responsible for about 10 grand. So that's still a lot, but it was not nothing compared to a million. So, so he went through high school. He was not able to drive because his peripheral vision he had field cuts on the left side of both eyes. But he handled it. My younger son had gotten his license, so he drove him everywhere. Um, and things were good. Got through high school. And then he wanted to go to college. He wanted to go to Schoolcraft to take classes. Well, obviously, he couldn't drive. So I had gone back to work and I ended up having to quit my job because I was like, he wants to do this. He can't drive. He's got classes at Schoolcraft 4 days a week. So I quit my job so I could drive him back and forth. And he did pretty well. And then he decided that he wanted to go away. And of course, that was very hard for me. I was like, I can't, how am I supposed to let him go? So he ended up, I don't know how, but he ended up getting a job at U of M Hospital in the cardiac unit. He was just doing janitorial work. So my second one, Sam, he used to say, "Oh, Jack, he's sweeping up hearts and stuff in the cardiovascular unit." So he got a job there, found a place to live with some guys he didn't know. And he also went to Washtenaw Community College. So he was able to navigate the bus system and he walked everywhere too. So he was able to go to school and he did really well. So he got his associate's degree there. Um, and at that time, I was able to go back to work. So I got a job with Livonia Sabre Youth Coalition, which is actually right across the street from the chamber. And I worked with my friend Karen for a few years, and he did really well. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to transfer to Central Michigan." I'm like, "What? Okay." So so he did that. His plan at first was to be a nurse, but then he decided he's like, I don't know if I can handle the amount of knowledge you need to be a nurse. He goes, it's not, the math is really hard for me. So he decided to go into dietetics. So he went to CMU for the first year and he was there and he took the bus and he walked and he was fine. He met a bunch of people, including his wife. But back up just a little bit. When he was at Washtenaw Community College, he was at the gym over there. And I got a call from the gym and they said, your son's having a medical incident. And I was like, oh my God, did this thing rupture again? Because back up again, he had to have radiation on his brain. That was the hard thing, is that they couldn't do surgery on that blood vessel. They had to do a high concentrated dose of radiation. And it takes 3 years for it to close off. So in that 3 years, you just sit there going, please don't explode again. So when they called me, I was like, oh my God, it's happening again. So they said, where do you want him to go? And I said, take him to U of M. All of his records are there and everything. Took him to U of M. Turns out he had a seizure. And they said, this is something that happens, like all that scar tissue. They said it was probably just a matter of time. So then he ended up having epilepsy. when he was at Central, he had a couple seizures up there. And his girlfriend, he was able to call her and she would come pick him up and take care of him. And it took like 2 years to get the medication to work the right way, partially because he's a big guy and they couldn't figure out the dose. But then that next year, my second son, he had been at University of Akron and he hated it and he wanted to come back. So he went to Central. So they were at Central for 2 years together, which was great. They both graduated in 2020. Then he had an internship with a hospital in Saginaw. He had a place to stay. So he's now a registered dietitian, which is amazing. I never thought he would make it to that point. He's married to a doctor, thank God. They live in Grand Rapids. He works in Battle Creek. And along the way, after all the seizures were under control, we took him to Henry Ford Vision Clinic. And I figured, okay, well, maybe he can go through a couple of years of rehab with his eyes to be able to drive. And the lady comes out and she says, he can go get his license tomorrow. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And I just burst out crying, of course. And she's like, yeah. She goes, he's gotten enough vision back that he can drive again legally and he's able to compensate for everything. And she goes, that's what happens, when you're young. She said if he was 40, no way. But she said that him being young was on his side. So he went the next day and got his license and bought a car. So he's done more than we ever thought would be possible. So he's happy. He's got a dog now. He's got a great job, a lovely wife, lots of friends.
Life has a funny way of reminding us that we can't plan for everything, but we can prepare for what matters most. That's why I'm so thankful for today's sponsor, Tammy Brown Insurance Agency. Tammy and her team don't just sell policies, they build relationships. Whether you're protecting your home, your car, or your family's future, Tammy takes the time to really listen and find coverage that fits your life. As a mom, a homeowner, and a Michigander, I love knowing that I've got someone local in my corner who actually cares, not just about my insurance, but about my peace of mind. So if you've been putting off checking your coverage, take this as your sign. Call Tammy Brown Insurance Agency or visit the Tammy Brown Agency Facebook page and tell them the Show Me the Way podcast sent you. Because when life takes a turn, it helps to have someone who can show you the way back to security.
He says the wrong word for things sometimes. Um, there was the one that the kids love to make fun of him for. And that's another thing is we had to use humor. So we all make fun of each other a lot. And one time we were watching a Peanuts special, I think, and he goes, "Oh, there's Woodstick instead of Woodstock." So of course we give him a hard time every time. But um, he's if too many people are talking to him, he has to stop you and say, "Okay, somebody's got to start over." Um, he I don't want to say it's not selective hearing, but it's like selective hearing, but he can't, if he's looking at something and you're talking to him, he can't do both at the same time. Unfortunately, back in May, we went as a family out to Arizona, all of us, because my niece got married. So we rented this Airbnb. We had a great time, but the weekend was filled with the hot sun, being in the pool, too much to drink, no sleep, and probably not enough water, which is the perfect combination for a seizure, which he ended up after my husband and I and daughter left for the airport, he had a seizure in the bathroom. And he went in because he didn't want his wife to see it. Another thing where things happen for a reason, my son Sam, he and his girlfriend had gone to the airport and they missed their flight because of TSA. So she got on another flight and he decided to wait until the evening. So he came back to the house. So he was there to help her with him. Jack went to the bathroom and he ended up falling and he hit his eye on the side of the toilet. So he had a huge black eye. but they heard something fall and they're like, "What was that?" And then Sam heard the knock, like, it was like knocking on the door, and Sam goes, "He's having a seizure." So they were able to take care of him, and they had to be out of the house at 10. But luckily, my niece and her husband had an Airbnb and were staying till the next day. So they were able to take him over there, and he slept all day, and he ended up being okay. But after that, of course, being a mom, I was always like, "Are you drinking enough water? Are you doing this? You doing that?" And his wife, Ellen, was the same way. She's a doctor, she knows. And so he got kind of mad at us, and he's like, "Listen, it, I know you think I'm going to die all the time," but he said, "I'm fine. I'm taking care of myself. If I die, I want to die doing something I love and being happy. I don't want to die sitting on the couch wrapped in bubble wrap because you guys can't handle it." I'm like, "You know what? You are right." So yeah, so he actually finally went and got an MRI because he hadn't had one in a long time, and he had an EEG, and they that was, for him normal. It was just to see the brain waves for his seizures, and they said there's nothing, nothing going on in there. So he's good. So right now he's doing well. I still, when the when the phone rings, if it's my kids, I always get that sick feeling in my stomach. But that whole experience, just it made us so much stronger as a family, and just taught us a lot and taught us how to appreciate things and appreciate life and find the joy and the humor and everything. But it believe me, it's been hard, and that's it. Just thinking, okay, is this going to happen to any of my kids? And, one of the other ones. And the doctors are like, no, it's not hereditary. It's just, it's just a birth defect. And we had no idea that he had anything like that. And you wouldn't unless he'd had an MRI for something else.
Right.
So, but
Yeah, you answered my questions. I was gonna say, was there any idea that something like that would happen later in life? But you had no clue of it until
no,
that first call. Okay.
no. And that first call, when they said he had a really bad headache, that's what I thought was aneurysm.
Okay,
You
okay. Yeah,
know,
you did say, I knew it was something." Okay, so you had been aware of that
yeah,
before.
I knew it was going to be bad.
When you received that call, were they just at that I think you said, Steak and Shake, was he just there or was he in the car? Like, had he been driving?
No, his friends were driving and they went inside and to order. They said he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm getting really hot. I'm going to walk outside." And this place at that time, it was a mile from our house. And they said he walked outside and then some guy came in. He's like, "Hey, is this your friend out here on the ground?" And they went out and they said he was just laying there. He couldn't see. He couldn't see. And he was just like, "My God, my head hurts so bad." And the fire station was a half mile down the road. So they came and got him. And that was it. It was just that freaky of a thing. It just happened.
You shared so much and, uh, so eloquently. I appreciate the steps that you went through and just walking us through such a difficult time, and obviously, it's not the first time you've shared that story, so
Yeah.
you really told it in a way where we can all almost feel like we're there with you, so I appreciate you going into that depth and sharing the details of that very, very difficult time. But so many things I wrote down. First of all, a lot of things you said come up in a lot of our different discussions. And something that I continue to say, especially for season 2, is the importance of community and the village. And you brought that up again without me even saying it, and I had written down what was going on with the other children while you were so focused on Jack, and you had said, "My parents were with them." But then your poor mother then had to deal with your poor father, so there's all of that. But just having community, and then you talked about his coach and the whole basketball team coming in, and even the fact that he opened his eyes when he heard a friend speak. So, I would love if you touched on the importance of community and counting on this village of people a little more.
It was amazing. And that's why um, I love to help people, obviously, with what I do and everything. And that is part of the reason is because I had so many people. I had a woman that I worked with came up to the hospital like the third day and they called me down to the desk and I was like, "Oh, I can't deal with anybody right now." Not that I didn't want to see anyone, So I walked down there, she gave me a hug, and she goes, "That's all I came for," and she walked out. And she lived in Madison Heights, so that was quite a hike for her to come all the way over to Ann Arbor just to hug me. That was it. Just the people that I worked with, my neighbors, the people that my husband worked with, they brought us a huge box full of snacks. And it was perfect. Well, they brought us toothbrushes and toothpaste and all kinds of things that you need, and crossword puzzle books and things like that. So that was amazing. My neighbors and my friends were there to help with the kids, and my parents, obviously, they were, but then couldn't after. My brother, he's in the army. He's stationed in South Korea right now, but at that time, he was down in Kentucky, Tennessee. I can't remember which base that was, but so he was close enough that he could drive up. So he was a huge help. Him and his wife, and my sister lives in England, so she obviously couldn't come. And my sister Vicky had passed away 2 years before this happened. And I kept praying and telling her, "Will you please watch over him?" And she did. And I figured she would. So um, but yeah, and then people kept wanting to bring us food, and it's like, we can't, we're in the hospital all the time. We live here basically. So once we came home for like 3 weeks, we had meals every day, and it was great. It was just so much easier because I was driving to Ann Arbor every day. I had a great daycare provider. My friend Kathy lived across the street from me, and she was lovely. She did so much for me. Just the amount of people that helped me. I had one friend that brought all my kids up to see Jack because Rob and I were up there. Yeah, I don't, and Livonia is a, when you tell people that something's wrong and you need help, they are there. They don't care if they know you or not. It's funny how many people are like, there was a girl from the chamber, we were at a networking event, and she had gone to the same high school as the boys. And I asked her, I said, "Did you know them?" And she's like, I don't think so. Like, I don't recognize the name. I was a freshman when your older son was a senior." And I said, "Oh, well," I said, "you might remember there was a kid that had a massive brain bleed, blah, blah, blah." She goes, "Oh, that was your son? Oh, yeah, I knew who he was." And so a lot of people knew about him. Even the police chief. I didn't know the police chief knew about him, but apparently his son went to Stevenson as well. So yeah. So, yeah, community is huge.
Yeah, and it makes me think of a lot of times I say on the show, whenever you think of somebody, whenever someone crosses your mind, reach out and for that person to come up from Madison Heights just to give you a hug. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's all we need.
Yep.
So I just appreciate when people and you hear so many negative things in this world. You hear about all the bad and all the hatred and all the judgment. You don't always hear how beautiful it is when somebody just gives you a hug when you most need it, or somebody's there to help you with your children, or someone thinks, oh, they're going to need toothbrushes. Let me make sure I
Yep.
package that stuff up. So I love, love, love when our guests share the stories of the little. I was talking about this with a group yesterday, the ordinary people who do extraordinary things. So they
Yeah.
don't think they're doing much, but they make a big difference just by the little gestures like that. So I'm very grateful when guests are able to remind us of all of that. And then I also wrote down, wow, I don't care if I fail, I got to try. That is awesome. And I
Mhm.
do think we can learn so much from sometimes from younger people, the way that
Right.
they look at life. And I think that's a great perspective for us all. I think a lot of times this world's changed quite a bit, especially since COVID, where it's like, oh, we better make this route a little bit easier. We better not make them do this, or this part's too difficult. But I love that he was like, no, like I can do what all of my classmates are doing. I can try and right. What is the worst that's going to happen? He would be in the same position. If he didn't
Right.
try, it'd be in the same position. So I appreciate that so much. I hope that's something that he continues to take with him. Sounds like it. Sounds like he's a very motivated and driven person to make things work. So
Yeah.
that is a very important quote that I'm going to remember from today's conversation. And then the other thing that you taught me, I knew we were going to learn so much, the lessons that kids teach us and that being a mom, how we learn from our children. And I say that often in the show. My son Nathan, I don't always understand why he has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, why he can't walk and he's in a wheelchair and he needs his dad and me to help him do everything and he's 16. I don't understand all of that, but I do understand that he has taught our family and everybody that he comes in contact with so much about life, and I'm the same way, like, how can he do things without me? I need to be around, I need to be here, but there's so many times that he surprises me and he can do things without me. So you were talking about your son going away to school or going to live with someone else. I think about those things because my son's 16. I'm like, "Oh gosh, what would I do if he says, I wanna try to live away from you?" I would probably completely panic, but I do see other kids with the same diagnosis who have figured out a way. So you're very inspirational to me being like, sometimes you gotta listen and you gotta work with your child. Obviously, there would be a ton of accommodations, but to just allow them the freedom because they're getting older and they deserve that. So I appreciated you talking about that as well. One other thing I wanted to touch on, which I think is incredibly important, and I share a lot because I have another son too. So having siblings go along with all of this. What do you think, especially Sam, it sounds like he was a huge part of Jack's recovery, and just ever since then, he just jumps into action whenever he needs to. What do you think all this process has taught your kids?
Oh gosh, with Sam, so I, the night that we had to call him, he asked us if Jack was gonna die, and I said I don't know. I wish I could tell you no, but I don't know. So I remember that being horrible. Then he was at home. He's 15, and he was at home with all those kids all night long. They got up in the morning, and he had to tell them. They didn't know. So I just feel bad that he had to handle that for us. But before that, he was kind of a troublemaker, and he just was always trying to start stuff. And after that, he completely changed. He was going to quit football because he wanted to take care of Jack. Their room was in the basement. So I remember they were downstairs sleeping, and I remember Sam going up the stairs with Jack to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. He wouldn't let him go up the stairs alone. So he took really good care of him, and he has ever since. But he also doesn't let him get away with anything. I remember coming home and they were in the backyard and they were hitting the golf ball, and Jack was hemming and hawing about something, and Sam goes, "Hit the ball." And he's just like, "No, you're not gonna feel sorry for yourself. You're just gonna do this." And he just changed a lot. He basically became the big brother in the family. So he's our anchor. He's very protective of his siblings. It really affected him. Also affected my youngest son, Charlie. He's 20. He's at Saginaw Valley, and he's always been an old soul. But a friend of mine was driving him to football practice one day during all of this with her twin boys, and they were fighting. And she told me that Charlie said, "You guys should just be grateful that you have each other." And that's, of course, that's a killer. He's a lot like Sam. Charlie's just a great kid. He's just easygoing. He loves his family. And they joke around a lot. They always have fun. Max was another one of my ones that he gave us a lot of grief for a long time. 'Cause he's our middle child, we call him our moody artist, because he's not the sports kid. He loves photography and art. He's a hippie, he's kind of a hippie. But after all that, he ended up becoming very, very family oriented, and he loves being with family. Like, that's huge for him. And he is just a sweetheart, just loves everybody. And my daughter, it was kind of the same thing. She just grew up really fast. They all had to grow up really fast, but they were great. They were great. I just feel bad that they had to go through that. Of course, I feel bad for Jack that he had to go through it, but he always says, he's like, "Oh, that's just part of what I had to do.
Mhm.
That was
Right.
part of his plan." So, um, yeah, but they're all good right now. So,
Now you said, and it sounded very clear as you were talking about your children, that going through something like this, how awful it is, but bringing you all closer. Would you say the same about you and your husband too? Like it helped the 2 of you bond
Oh,
or
yeah, most
yeah.
definitely. It just going through that and managing it and getting through it. Um, I had a friend who she was married and her daughter, when she was 12, had leukemia. Just so you know, that girl is now like 35 years old, has 2 kids, and she's great. But that really messed them up. I think Rob and I have always been solid from the beginning, but that just made it even more. We were partners. We're a team. We handle everything together. And I mean, he's such a great person anyway. But yeah, I would definitely say that brought us a lot closer.
Yeah, and you use the word partners. I say that a lot with my husband and me because if we weren't partners, I don't see how we would have made it through those first early years as we did because
Yeah.
you have to rely on one another. There were days where I was unsure of the future and crying and I couldn't calm down and he would be the sane one or the calm one and then vice versa. If there was a rough day for him, then I would be the stronger one for him. So
Right.
it's so important to have that partnership.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So you also mentioned nurses. So I wanted to touch on that because I couldn't agree more. And my older sister is a nurse. She's been a nurse for like 20 years. She's a labor and delivery nurse. She was there for both of my children's births and
Aw.
she's the greatest nurse I've ever been around and I know many of her patients would say that. But we've also had a recent guest who has been a nurse. I have a really good friend who was another recent guest who is going back to school to be a nurse. So I couldn't agree more with what you said about how important they are. I mean, obviously we need the doctors, we need the surgeons, but the people that are in the trenches, they they're so
Oh, yeah.
very important.
Most definitely. They're the ones the doctors come in there and they're like, "Okay, well, I think he should get this much or of this medication or whatever." And of course, you love the surgeons, you love the doctors, they're great. But those nurses, you can't do anything without them.
Right, I agree. So shout out to all the nurses listening because
For
we
sure.
appreciate you for sure.
For
I
sure.
couldn't agree with that more. Wow. Well, I mean, like I said, you taught us so much just in everything that you spoke about and the way that you shared it. I really appreciated following along and just feeling like I was there with you. And then just everything that has come from your family since a lot of what you said about your kids, it makes me think of my older son so much. We were watching a show yesterday where a couple of brothers were wrestling one another like brothers do. And I remembered when my kids were younger, I mean, that's what boys do. They just like love to wrestle. I don't really
Yeah.
understand. I've got 2 sisters. There weren't any brothers in my life. So I'm
Yep.
like, why do boys do that? And you saw that quite a bit, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And my younger son, so he was diagnosed when he was 5, but even before that, like he always was a little different with how he walked and how he
Yeah.
try to climb on things, and so I'm looking back, my older son probably sensed some of that, and then when he was diagnosed, he was able to walk for quite a bit still, but you could always tell he was a little weaker, and we wanted him to be careful, and so
Yeah.
my older son would, like, pretend wrestle with them because that's all my younger son wanted to do. He's like,
Yeah.
"Wrestle me, come get me." But my older son, Nick, he knew that I can't be too crazy on him. You know, he's made differently, and I would just watch them, and he would, like, do it to an extent, and then he'd get real soft, or he would, like,
Yeah.
pretend he's gonna jump on him, and then he wouldn't, and it's just these siblings, we don't know what it's like because we're not the sibling, we're the parent, which is a completely different perspective, but just how they approach things and how they have this love for their siblings and how they are different than most other kids. They just recognize very early on, unfortunately and fortunately, that they have gotta be a little bit different with their brother
Yeah.
or they have to look out for them in a different way, and I so
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yep. For sure. My kids, they're so close, and I never when they were growing up, they fight and whatever, and you
Mhm.
just are like, "Oh my gosh, are they ever gonna like each other?" And I mean, they talk all the time, and,
Oh, that's
um,
wonderful.
those boys are all over their sister, they don't like her boyfriend, and they're always, "You gotta break up with him," and they really watch out for each other, which is great.
Mhm.
So,
That That's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if we can find some positive light on all of this traumatic these traumatic events that you went through, there's some very positive things that you shared, and I really appreciate that perspective and you getting to that point. When you first started talking, I wasn't really sure where you were going to go. I thought, please tell me there's positive outcome here. And so to hear that he is married and doing well and figuring things out and married to a doctor, that was quite a
Yes.
blessing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I'm so very grateful that you have that to share with us still after such a difficult time. And I'm sure it's still scary every once in a while, but I love the approach where he said, we've got to just live. We've got to be
Right.
joyful. And that's so very true. You never ever know what tomorrow brings. And you still don't. None of us
Yeah,
do.
right,
So to learn to take advantage
right.
of that, and especially when you're younger too, those younger children that when the siblings were younger and to get that instilled very early on, I think is huge because I don't think I really learned that until I was much older.
Oh,
So,
same here, 'cause, we never went through anything like that.
mm-mm, no.
Like I said, that my sister had passed away 2 years before Jack had his whole thing, and she was 47.
Oh, wow.
So that was traumatic for,
Mhm,
siblings and my parents and I.
mhm.
But, we were grateful we had some time with her before, and, I got to be her caregiver for a while, and that really helped.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Well, you have certainly given us all kinds of little nuggets and little tidbits and pieces that we all need to remember and take with us. I wrote down hope, humor, and joy, such important little pieces that we need to remember when we go through difficult things and just throughout life and just how precious life is. I have so many little words written all over my notepad here. So you've definitely given us a lot, but I'll give you one more opportunity if there's something that you would like to share with our listeners about your perspective.
I would have to say never give up hope. Hope was a huge word for us at that time. Just because at first we didn't think he was going to survive, and then if he did, he was going to be non-communicative. We didn't know what he was going to be. So just hope. There's always hope. And that was a big word for us at that time.
Yeah, I had a guest on about, I don't know, a month ago, Candace Genovich. You'll need to go back and listen to that. Your son reminds me of her because she went through a really traumatic incident too. One day she was fine, the next day dealt with similar situation as a stroke. I know
Yeah.
that she speaks about the different diagnosis that she got and all of the things that go along with it. But she's young, late 30s, early 40s, and she basically had to teach herself to walk again and she's still going through all of this and it's the same way you look at her and she just has hope. She just I'm going
Yeah.
to keep going. I'm not going to give up. I've got kids, I've got a life. I'm just going to keep going and that's the same type of mentality I got from her story as I'm hearing from Jack's story too.
Yeah. Yep. Your life, we had no idea that was coming. And
Right.
we went to bed thinking, okay, we'll see him in the morning.
Mhm.
Well, your life changes in an instant. So you just enjoy every little bit, be happy, be good to people, be kind. You
Makes
know,
a big difference.
it does. It does.
Yeah, actually, I texted a friend yesterday that I was thinking about, and she's got a new venture going, and I just wanted to reach out and tell her that I was happy for her and that I want to see her soon. And she was so grateful for that little thought. And the same thing I was with a group of friends I'm in a Bible study with, and we were talking about this other woman that we all know, we all have in common, and we were all complimenting her for different reasons. And so last night I did the same thing. I felt compelled to reach out to her and say, "You were the name that kept coming up in our discussion
And
today, and I just wanted to tell you how grateful we all are for you." And she said, "This just warmed me because of all the blessings that are going on right now. And what if more of us did that? What if more of us like
right.
remembered these things and then reached out to people and expressed it?" So that's a reminder again to my listeners, reach out to somebody that you're thinking about and you never know what a difference that could make.
Yeah. You're standing
Oh,
behind someone in line at the grocery store and you like their hair or their jacket. I constantly do that. I know it does drive my kids nuts. They're like, "God, you talk to everybody." And I said, "Because you don't know, you might change somebody's life that day."
I agree.
So,
Yeah. Well, you keep doing that because I said that during the intro. It's something I picked up right away. We haven't known each other for very long, but every time I've seen you, you're smiling. You have something nice to say. You remind people of important things they need to know. You're just a very good connection to have. So I'm grateful that you do that. So keep doing that.
Thanks, Andrea. I
Of
appreciate that.
of course. Well, this has been such a beautiful episode. I'm very grateful you were willing to share your story. I think Christine is pretty good at telling people they need to get their stories out there. she's I won't say pushy. What's the word? I don't know. She's very good
Just
at
good at
making sure.
nudging you.
Nudging, yeah, I
Mm.
like that.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful that you were on this morning. I appreciate you sharing your story, and God bless you and your family, and all my prayers and thoughts to you guys. I hope Jack continues to make such a big difference in this world, and you make me wanna meet your whole family.
Oh, thanks, Andrea.
So
I appreciate you letting me tell my story. It's very therapeutic. I like to talk about it because just it helps. It feels good to talk about it.
yeah, and you're reminding people they're not alone. They may not go through
Yeah.
exactly what you went through or what Jack went through, but just to understand that, oh, I'm not alone when I go through a hard time, or there is hope out there, or there are fantastic ways to kind of cope with what I'm dealing with. So I think
Yeah,
everyone needs to hear it. So yeah, thank you. I can't wait to
exactly.
share this.
Oh, thanks, Andrea.
Thank you for joining me for the Show Me the Way podcast. I truly appreciate you tuning in to today's episode about overcoming adversity and finding your path. I hope it brought you new insights, empowered you with perspective, and inspired you to find joy in your journey. If this episode touched your heart, don't forget to leave a quick review as it will help us reach and motivate more people. Until next time, keep seeking the light and showing the way.